Thank you so much for spending your valuable time with me for the next 50 minutes or so. I will do a quick housekeeping, try to silence your phones, be considerate of people around you. I'm going to try to save Q&A for the end, and if you'll come up to the microphones, then you can ask questions so that everyone can hear. So quick shout out to a couple of the folks who got me here, Justin Murhoff and Aditi Shah. Aditi is here, so I'm so grateful for that. But we've had a lot of conversations about how our communities can work better together between accessibility compliance and security compliance. Sometimes we have jargon that just goes head to head. How can we come together and talk about our shared goals and accomplish them at the same time? So we've got the standard disclaimers, RSA. There's also one for Visa. Believe it or not, I have a great relationship with our legal team at Visa, and I'm truly grateful for that. My goals today. I want to highlight for you a little bit about the accessibility compliance program, accessibility and security, and I'm going to ask you to approach this with an open mind to help understand where this might impact your work and how we can come together. And then in the application mode, start with a persona that we're going to go through together today, and then consider using it in your current work. And so I'll go over this again at the end, but I've got kind of a next week, within the next 3 months, within the next 6 months plan, but I'll go into more detail about that at the end so that you could, think through it all. So first, I want to go into a bit of a story mode. It's a bit of an illustration to help us think through how we have a shared approach to the topic. So in the late 1940s, early 1950s, the US Air Force had a huge life or death problem on their hands, and it wasn't getting any better no matter what they did. As an example, in February 1950 alone, there were nearly 200 plane accidents, some fatal, some not, and the planes were like the F-51D Mustangs shown here. So researchers at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base investigated to try to figure out what's going on. The initial instinct was to pin the blame on pilots because the engineers could prove that there were no unmanageable malfunctions with the planes. And then the pilots were baffled too because they were following their best-in-class training to the T. So they've combed through data, reports, research, and they thought, okay, well, let's turn our focus to the cockpit. The cockpit was designed in 1926 to perfectly match the average of hundreds of pilots at that time. So they thought, okay, let's look at the cockpit a little bit more. We've got all of these levers, we've got these gauges. This is a cockpit of the B-29 bomber at the time, and everything in it is very rigid. When they're thinking through a new design, researchers thought, well, pilots must have changed since 1926. It's been nearly 25 years. So let's check it out. We're going to expand our data. We're going to study the largest number of pilots to date, almost about 4,000. And almost everyone thought that new measurements of more pilots in more dimensions would help address the problem. They could design, once again, the new modern perfect cockpit. On the right is Lieutenant Gilbert Daniels. This is him much later in life, but early on, he was brought in to do the measurements. He was a young researcher, young lieutenant at the time, a fresh recruit, and he was going to do the research to measure, study 10 dimensions of more than 4,000 pilots. So as he was crunching the numbers in his report, he thought to himself, well, how many people really actually fit the average of all these measurements? And to most everyone's surprise, the answer was 0. The snippet of Lieutenant Daniels' report shows the data where in stature alone, those who fit the average was immediately cut by almost 75%. It went from 4,063 pilots down to 1,055. The numbers continue to decrease from there as you go through all these dimensions until you get down to number 9, where there's 2 folks left on the list. And then they add one more dimension, 0. So to be sure, they're like, well, let's check again. They expanded the research range, more measurements this time, to understand the sheer range of human possibility and difference. And keep in mind at the time, this is a really homogenous group of people. These were US pilots in the 50s. And so they already had to meet very specific standards to be a pilot. So the information became the spark to guide the Air Force to create adjustable cockpits. And they can be customized to fit each pilot and solve a multi-dimensional problem and a very complex problem. So by the way, if you do want to read more about this, it is in the book called End of Average by Todd Rose. It's a really fascinating book about how sometimes we over-index on average or quote-unquote normal. So why does it matter? How does this apply to today? So we have 8.1 billion people in the world, and we have at least 1.3 billion people with formalized disability. And how can you build a truly secure environment if you're leaving out 20% or more of the population? So I also encourage you not to think of this as charitable work, because once you add in friends and family, the global market of this has an estimated $16 trillion in spending power. So that potential becomes exponential when you realize that disability touches almost everybody. People get sick, they have temporary disabilities, they have injuries, there's situational limitations. And we now witness every day where access to digital spaces is just as important as access to our physical spaces. And when we do the work to make things accessible, it breaks down these digital barriers and keeps everyone more secure and their information secure at the same time. One thing that I wanted to call out is we're constantly asked to do more with less. A lot of you might be here because maybe you've heard of EAA, ACA, ADA, WCAG, like you name the alphabet soup around accessibility and compliance, and like, how does this impact me? I've got one more thing added to my list and I have no time. And we end up taking shortcuts to focus on quote unquote average or normal, maybe even minimum viable product, MVP. But as we zoom out to notice our differences, we realize that no one is average, and we end up leaving out more people than we include. So making accessible experiences, not only it's the right thing to do, but perhaps you need or work with people who need this framed from a risk perspective. So during 2024, in the United States alone, there were about 2 new accessibility lawsuits for every working hour. And some folks might wave that risk off as like, well, settle amounts are huge, so like, it's the cost of doing business. So, but what isn't figured into that is the legal, logistic, operational costs of merely getting to that settlement, not to mention disruption of time to focus on other work and innovations. And some companies try to address this accessibility deficit with plugins or widgets, which are Band-Aid fixes that do not address the deeper issues. They're ineffective solutions, and they leave businesses exposed not only to litigation at multiple jurisdictional levels, international down to even state, but also to cyber attacks from third-party vulnerabilities. So typically, these widgets inject additional UI on top of already existing UI, which creates a different set of vulnerabilities. For example, in 2019, the accessibility overlay company called Nagitch was hacked using a JavaScript vulnerability that defaced around 1 million pages and thousands of sites. And many of those sites had global brand recognition. So quickly, I want to go through some of the basics and introduce the topic of digital accessibility. The first thing that I want to cover is that in its really simplest form, digital accessibility is giving programmatic structure to digital experiences. Hopefully this sounds familiar. AI is programmatic structure to all of this data. So similar to how search engines and, like I said, AI structure either the unstructured web or all of this information, assistive technology helps compile this results and this information in a way that people can access regardless of their abilities. So in the screenshot here, I've got the W3C's website, and I highlight under the hood what code is used to help assistive technology give users a chance to build a mental model of the page's structure and information. These are simple headings that show how content is organized and related to one another. There's no fancy features, there's no extras to download, it's just there in the code. It's flexible, it's there from the start without having to inject anything or add anything. And in our digital world for accessibility, like you, we have standards and guidelines. Ours are from the W3C, which is the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or WCAG. The overarching principles for these fall into sections around making experiences perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust, and they help a range of disabilities, so visual, speech, physical, neurological, cognitive, auditory, you name it. And if you've worked with experts before, you might have found that a lot of them focus on total blindness a lot, and although it doesn't impact quite as many people, it still helps people find the most solutions to increase access for the most amount of users. So as this slide shows, there's a through line of permanent, temporary, and situational disabilities that humans deal with around touch, hearing, speech, more. And then when we solve for one, it extends to many. So I've got a permanent example of touch, somebody's got one arm. Temporary, they've got an arm injury. Situational, they're a new parent holding a baby. Around sight, somebody might be totally blind, and that's a permanent disability, but a temporary one is around cataracts, or a situational one for a distracted driver. Permanent for hearing, somebody's deaf. Temporary is an ear infection, and situational is a bartender. They're at a loud bar. And finally, with speech, an example is somebody might be nonverbal, but maybe temporarily they have laryngitis, or situational, they have a heavy accent. So it becomes clear that purposely including accessibility benefits people without disabilities. There are so many examples of how this agility and the ones and zeros of our experiences take these binary pieces of code, these ones and zeros, and creatively adapt it for a complex world of different people. Like you consider IoT devices with different modalities and input methods, aging people who experience changing abilities, maybe temporary things like I mentioned, the broken arm, you've got lost glasses, maybe you're fatigued from an especially crazy week, or you're recovering from an injury. We've got, again, I said people with accents, or people who might not be as fluent in the dominant language in their locale. Situational limitations, like maybe you've got a bright light or in a loud environment, or you've got slow internet and limited bandwidth. So when you build in this flexibility, like I was saying, it gives people agency to use our stuff the way that they understand. And without that, people are stuck using rigid experiences that reduce folks to single nameless data points. And those data points don't fit the actual human experience in all the ways that we interact with things. So this lack of flexibility, of options, of clear communication are what lead to breaches caused by both skill-based errors and decision-based errors. So this example from Verizon, it's their 2024 Data Breach Investigations Report, and it highlights that non-malicious human element is the most common threat vector, causing 68% of breaches. 68%. That's more than double the amount of ransomware or extortion, which is 32%, or even errors, which is 28%, and then it's exponential over third-party vulnerabilities at 15%. So as you know, these human element attacks are some of the most difficult to mitigate. So where does this leave us? How do we collaborate to create a flexible experience that gives human the right agency and access while not opening the door to bad actors and threats? And I want to explore some stories and people that can help bridge our industries, that can help open our minds and learn where our best practices and standards can meet. And know that these stories, they're anonymized, they're amalgamated, but they're real people, people I know, I work with, I'm friends with, and I respect deeply. So I'm going to start with Jorge, and Jorge's example shows how if we make our cybersecurity training and textbooks and tools accessible, it opens employment opportunities for people that were previously locked away or it took a lot more effort to get here. And it not only keeps out Jorge, but thousands of others, with the need for cybersecurity professionals and innovative approaches continuing to surge. So Jorge, he's 21, he's an undergrad at Georgia Tech in their cybersecurity and privacy program. He loves making jewelry. He's an avid reader, especially of fantasy novels, and he likes to play goal ball every Saturday. And if you don't know what goal ball is, look it up online. It's a pretty amazing sport. It's at the Paralympics. So his concern, he's been blind since birth, and he really excels in computer engineering. But he faces more hurdles as he really starts to dig in and specialize more in his cybersecurity program. And since a lot of the tools don't work for his assistive technology, JAWS, he's at a bit of a disadvantage. And his motivation is he got a full ride to Georgia Tech. He's excited to be in Atlanta, and he grew up in a small town in Montana. He's interested in bringing fresh ideas and approaches to the complexities of cybersecurity. And he feels like he has unique experiences that make him a real asset to the community. His current coursework is getting more difficult, and the tools are less accessible. He's really worried that he's going to hit a wall and get to a place where he can't continue, and he's got to pick between staying and working through it or leaving the program and finding something different altogether. He's really passionate about cybersecurity, though, and he wants to see how far he can go. Like I mentioned earlier, a lot of the tools don't necessarily work for a screen reader, and so at that point, he spends extra time getting to the same point as his classmates, and sometimes he has to ask for a bit of additional assistance. But when things are accessible, often he's way more efficient at finding information and gaining those insights. Then we've got Calvin. He's 24. He's a cybersecurity intern working on a new AI tool. He loves playing digital board game. He's mastering in cybersecurity. He likes to explore the city of Austin with his friends, and he's trying the latest restaurants. And his concern, he had an arm injury from a scooter accident, and it affected his dominant left elbow. It's sprained, and his wrist is fractured. He's using a keyboard by itself now at work, and he's really ditched his mouse. He preferred keyboard before, but now it's really literally a pain to use the mouse. So he wants to make the most of his 12-week internship, and it's despite his injury. So proving his ability with this high visibility project really could get him his dream job. So he wants to make the most of it, and he's worried that if it doesn't go well, he'll lose out on opportunities. So his journey, he's working on a high security project, and it requires him to authenticate every 15 minutes. And he's tempted to kind of go around the security measures to prevent things like when he's going to meetings or going to get a snack, to prevent that timeout. But he really knows he's not supposed to. And he doesn't want to compromise his credentials. He understands the policies and the real-time attacks that could happen. So he just wishes there was something to help him not lose out on his productivity. And with his injury, like I said, he's using his non-dominant right hand now, and he's less precise. He's got a complex 12-digit passcode. His company does not allow password managers or pasting content into the login screen. And because he's using a keyboard, sometimes you get those timeout modals pop up, and he can't get to it fast enough with his keyboard when the session expires. Then we've got Preeti. Preeti's 35 in Adelaide. She's a senior cybersecurity engineering manager, managing 16 pen testers. She loves to travel, and she's an amateur photographer prepping for her first show. She was diagnosed with something called retinitis pigmentosa, and that helps, well, not helps, but it eventually leads to blindness. She's got a little bit of tunnel vision now, which isn't the worst, but her eyes easily get tired. Her motivation is that she's up for a promotion to director. Her team collaborates well, they're managing high-impact projects, and they're exceeding expectations. She hasn't shared her condition with her colleagues at all, and she's worried that if she does, they're going to think less of her or maybe remove her from some difficult projects. And she's also worried about losing her edge or being seen as incapable when she finally feels like she's at her prime. So she knows she's at a crossroads. She either speaks up and asks for additional support, or she continues to work harder to keep her disability quiet and find her own ways to adapt. She has a lot of ways to modify the data views that she uses, from her current platform to her own custom views, but there are certain tools that really just don't work at all, and so she delegates those responsibilities to other people, or finds a business justification to kind of explain why she's not doing it. And the innovations from her team have fantastic potential, but as her vision decreases, she realizes a lot of the data, tools, and techniques, like I said, rely on being able to see visualizations with specific meaning, or on tools that are not flexible enough to adjust even to her current customized dark mode setting and increased font size. We have Mo. He's a senior VP of sales, 41, Warsaw, Poland. He's an avid skier, loves playing drums and learning guitar. He speaks 4 languages. He has multiple sclerosis, or MS, and it's a disease that impacts the protective covering of nerves. His symptoms flare up and recede, but they're kind of getting worse and having fewer breaks. He most frequently experiences blurry vision and some brain fog, but sometimes he has a hard time walking and is randomly weak. His motivation, he travels a ton, and that's more taxing now, and it leads to longer, more severe flare-ups. A few people know about his condition, like his family, his executive assistant, some colleagues, but they forget because he looks so healthy. He's scared about the sudden increase in symptoms, and he really wants to do the most he can before others' symptoms appear or the existing ones get worse. So his journey, he's an international traveler, he's got intermittent connectivity to networks, and that makes following all the company policies very difficult. And he's got less mental energy to focus on the complex differing requirements to access his work accounts. So he tends to rely on his mobile device because it adapts better to his ever-changing environment and fluctuating abilities. And his struggles are that the requirements for him to use his tools while traveling can be too much for him. It's clear that the company's IT team only developed them for people on a desktop, in an office, with really good connections. So Mo wastes a lot of time trying to perform actions that aren't meant to be done on a phone. But that's really the only way he can get stuff done with such a fast-paced life. 2 more people. Jane, 49, Vancouver, British Columbia. She's a director of accessibility at a software company. She takes long walks with her dog. She's the brunt of jokes when she plays video games with her kids and spends time offline crocheting, cross-stitching, and felting. So she's sandwiched between 2 generations, I think, like a lot of us are, where she's caretaking for parents and helping them with their online lifestyle, and then kids. And she has ADHD. So it becomes harder for her to manage all of this with how complex everything is getting. Things are changing very fast, and everybody has a different need. So she wants to help keep her family safe, while she's also giving each person the agency to manage their own accounts and keep up with their own profiles. So even though Jane works in a technical role, she's a generalist when it comes to things outside of her own topic and her area of expertise. But she feels like things are changing so quickly, it's, again, difficult to keep up. So she avoids being an early adopter. She knows it's just one more account to manage, and when she's caught debugging a login or an account issue, she's tempted to cut corners by removing restrictions to give more flexibility, either to a kid who's ramping up their online privacy or security knowledge, or to an aging parent who says, like, I'm just trying to do something simple. And her struggles, like every site, seems to use different tools and policies, many with rigid experiences. So when she's creating these accounts, the versions for kids are either way too permissive or way too strict. And for her parents, she's struggling to figure out, like, what information and devices have they hooked up? Did they create like 15 new accounts or reset their password 87 times? Like, who knows? But when she's trying to troubleshoot, she's getting questions from multiple people, and then her own ADHD interrupts and she loses track. Final profile is Dan, 67, from Boston. He's newly retired, a CEO of a regional retailer, so he's super excited about his new hobbies of woodworking and gardening. He's not a digital native, but he loves a lot of tech gadgets, and he's adjusting to a life without people managing his schedule or handling his accounts. So he's a proud cancer survivor, and his hearing is not as sharp as it used to be. He's missing out on more. Also, he's developed some tremors in his hands and brain fog that reminds him of the cancer he had, the chemo brain, 20 years ago. So he's worried about telling people, and he's reluctant to go to the doctor because he'd rather kind of not know if this is normal or if it's something else. So his motivation, like I said, he's retired. He's living the life now, and he wants to stay current and contribute to the community. He just joined the board of his favorite nonprofit that helps kids learn about business and technology. And the board meets online. They use the cloud to share files, agendas. They set up a chat app to talk outside of meetings. And Dan has saved well for retirement, and he can afford to hire support. So he's considering hiring a college student to help him with all of his digital needs and keep him updated on the latest technologies. So he knows that understanding the current practices and policies help him create innovative ideas. And if you can't tell, Dan is going to be our cautionary tale. So he's not used to the complexity of creating and managing his own accounts, and like sharing documents. Sometimes even emailing is hard, and it takes him longer to navigate. And just when he figures it out, the interface changes again. So he often leaves his cell phone at home, and then he can't validate his accounts with all the types of codes that are texted and emailed to him. So when that happens, he's blocked. It's also a problem when he's given a QR code for anything. So now let's get into a little bit more with some examples of how these people come together with our user experience. And accessibility is often what I dub the canary in the coal mine, where when it isn't added into the product development flow, when you shift left, it can highlight everything from communication breakdowns, inadequate planning and training, or people being overworked as usual and moving too quickly. So these are the things that folks often forget to consider, and then they rely on assumptions of what they consider, again, quote unquote, normal or average. So we've got forms and errors. So a lot of this is where good practices come together, or they fall apart. I'm sure some of these are very familiar. So we've got a pass example on the left, a fail example on the right, and the pass example has username and a phone number inputs, and same with the fail. But on the pass example, there's visible labels and programmatic labels. It's very clear, they're linked together, but the fail, yeah, it does have a label, but it's placeholder text, and so it's really hard to read because there's low contrast in that field. And then when you click into the field, the label disappears. So if someone's interrupted, they may forget what that form input is for, and they go back and out and back in to figure out what it is. Then you'll notice that between the pass and the fail, the labels are very descriptive. So the pass example has username or email, and the fail example just has username, because every flow is different. Do I log in with my phone number? Do I log in with my email address? Is it a unique password? Do they accept multiple? Do they accept all? I don't know. I can't remember. I come here every 6 months. So if you make it clear to people from the beginning what to put in, you can encourage them to have success and go and lessen the amount of times they go through that authentication flow. And then the phone number example. I wanted to call out, there's also an example of how you know a field is required or not. In the pass example, it's there visibly, and it's there in the code. Like I said, nothing else to add on. It's just there. It's a parallel experience for everybody. And so that way, I know what I have to put in and what I can skip. Whereas on the fail example, no clue. Maybe all you need is my username, and I don't have to add my phone number. So finally, the error messages. So on the left, if I don't see color, I can tell that left side experience is in error, not only because there's a giant, bold box around the input, but there is helper text right underneath it that tells me what I did wrong, what field it's for, and how I need to fix it. And granted, I know this isn't the case for all experiences. Like, you're not going to tell people how to fix their password and ruin all your security protocol. But for simple other inputs, you can provide very clear text to help people figure out what to do. Whereas on the right, it's a really faint red line, so if I can't see color, it might look no different than what the field looks like when I put my focus in there. And then, if I fix the equal sign in the phone number that instead of the dash, did I fix all the errors, or is it going to ask me for a country code, or did I still have to put in my information in a certain way? So let's hear from our users. So Jorge says, if I had a dime for every inaccessible form field, I could have my own startup. So when I navigate to a form with my screen reader and I hear editable, I know it's not going to be a fun day. Since I learned to code, at least I can inspect it to see if there's a class name, maybe there's text around it or other detail that gives me a hint at what to type, but it still just slows me down. Calvin says, I need errors right next to the field with clear information, so I immediately know when something should be fixed. Also, when I can't autofill from a password manager or copy-paste, it's literally a pain. Jane says, I hate form labels that disappear when I'm in a field. I have to re-enter things so often, and when I'm interrupted, I can forget where I left off. So I delete things and then click out of the input to see what it's for. Also, sites use different info and formatting, so I want help to be successful from the start. Preeti says, I tend to hack things to customize and make them work for me, but it's so nice when things just adapt to my OS settings so I don't have to. Also, I'm really fast on the keyboard, so it's beyond irritating when I can't use it to log in or fill out forms. Mo says that a lot of text isn't bright enough for me, and in weird lighting situations, which I'm in a lot, it makes it worse. And then when my eyes are really bad, I adjust the text size, and a lot of things don't change. So I pinch and zoom to read things. Finally, Dan says, I'm so bad at typing, and with my shaky hands, I'm even worse. Typing on my phone isn't better because the keyboard is so small. People tell me to try to use the microphone to dictate instead, but with my thick accent, it doesn't understand me. I try to fill in only the minimum required to get done what I have to. Next, we have authentication. So this is another place where we've got barriers. And when it happens, people voluntarily compromise their information to get help and to accomplish their goal. So whether it's unintelligible CAPTCHAs, options that literally send people in circles or create insurmountable blocks based on ability or access, these are just a couple of examples. So I've got flexible options on the left and some rigid examples on the right. And the flexible options adapt to people. They give them choice, whether it's validating with a YubiKey, with biometrics, with OAuth, with push notifications, a call or a passcode. These options work with the person and with their circumstances. Compare that to the rigid examples on the right, the Chihuahua or Muffin CAPTCHA, the word jumble CAPTCHA, which relies on people being able to see, or when there's an audio option. If you attended Aditi's talk yesterday with Abhishala, you could hear that is unintelligible, and even if you could hear it, you couldn't remember what it was. Then you've got versions that require dexterity, like being able to drag a mouse very precisely to put a puzzle piece in place, or to click on these tiny little black and white images over another black and white blurry surface. So again, hearing from our users, Jorge says, authentication is another thing that trips me up. So whether it's image-only CAPTCHAs or has garbled audio alternatives, there are countless ways. I can tell no one thought beyond users who can see and use a mouse. I appreciate more flexible options from YubiKeys to OAuth, all with a flow I trust. Then Calvin says, one of my favorite games that I play uses a CAPTCHA that involves sliding a puzzle piece into place to confirm I'm me. But I haven't played it since my injury because I'm not precise using my right hand, and it doesn't work with a keyboard. For work, I tested a pilot of a YubiKey, and that really improved my productivity. And then Jane says, using OAuth for my personal accounts and single sign-on at work helped me reduce the amount of accounts I have to create and manage. There's also much less to remember, and I can create better, more secure passwords. Preeti says, I've lost count of how many different validation methods I've hacked, and now AI has made hacking CAPTCHAs easy. Computer vision is better than mine, but when I'm not hacking, there's such a barrier. I don't have time to hack every inaccessible auth. Mo says, my work accounts require me to validate my identity with an image CAPTCHA. It's so small on my device, I can't even see it. I wish they used features on my phone instead. I have several personal accounts that do this. And finally, Dan says, my tremors make those image things hard. I mess up a lot and reset my account. Thank goodness I write everything in my password book. When I get lost or mad, I give over the book and ask for help. Also, when a site asks me to turn on authentication, I skip it because I don't know what that means. Like I said, Dan is our cautionary tale. Then finally, we've got, social engineering, phishing, smishing, whaling, and not only are the telltale signs here in this phishing attack, you've got spelling errors, incorrect email, web addresses, but also a lack of accessibility. So if people know the patterns from their reliable sources, they're more likely to spot a fake. For example, screen readers hear the fake email address, unfamiliar emails, or misspellings. Also, they can notice a difference in or a lack of alternative text with the logo. And folks who adjust their OS settings in various ways also get other signs, like maybe a message is just an image of text instead of real text, or the colors in text don't adjust to their settings like the typical message does. So last experience from our users, their feedback. So Jorge says, I find fake emails way faster than my classmates because I don't get caught up by what something looks like. I can hear with my screen reader when things are misspelled, plus read in detail who sent it. I can also spot inconsistencies, like when an email is a picture with no description instead of real text that would normally be sent. Calvin says, I didn't realize until now how much I skimmed emails and jumped to conclusions. Now that I use my keyboard to tap to buttons and links, it's a lot easier to find when things are good or might need some further investigation to see if it's legit. Jane says, my parents are always showing me texts and emails they get asking for important info. Even my teen gets urgent requests for money from his, quote, friends on social media. And because we use password managers, even if we get fooled, pulling up a spoof site, the password manager doesn't recognize it, and it's enough to stop us before we go too far. Preeti says, it's interesting to see how sophisticated these are now, but it's really laughable because I can still tell they didn't make the scam thinking of a person with low vision. One time I opened a phishing message in my custom dark mode, and it was literally black text on a black background, a clear sign this was not a typical email. Mo says that since I give my details out for travel a lot, I get a lot of phishing emails. The one thing, when they get through the filter, they're good, but not good enough. One looked like an exact email I got a few months ago from my preferred airline, but when I zoomed in to read it, I found that it was a picture of an email they copied because the text got fuzzy. And then finally, Dan, our cautionary tale, says, I'm so worried about getting scammed online. Almost everything looks new all the time, or the sites I'm used to keep changing, so I can't tell what I can trust. Thankfully, I've hired that smart college student and given them all my passwords so they can help me. Oh, poor Dan. Hopefully, this highlights the importance of trust in the community when our systems fail and people don't know how to get through things. So, quick summary, and then we can move on to questions. Think back to the opening story about the Air Force. Remember that it was customization. It was adaptability that allowed them to be more responsive to a fast-paced, really complex environment because there was no one-size-fits-all. That same situation holds true today in our digital world. And when we build for the human differences that we all have, we can help reduce threats coming in for humans. So we want to scale down those rigid and complex approaches to digital problems because they can create just as many vulnerabilities as they fix. And remember that we're serving people, and we need solutions that dovetail with human nature and with human abilities instead of considering them flaws. Finally, adaptability creates really robust and innovative experiences. And let's see, yeah. There we go. Application reminder. So, as you have time, next week I urge you to pick one of the personas, or maybe even find your own if you know somebody that would be a useful persona. And then in the next 3 months, walk through your experience as that person to learn where their barriers are to accessing features and functionality. And keep in mind, you can get help. Maybe there's accessibility experts in your organization. Or there's plenty of blogs and videos online that show people both failing and succeeding in things that you're trying to do. And you can read more about assistive technologies commonly used. And then figure out how to remove these barriers. Maybe you have the power to do it directly, or maybe you can collaborate with others. And then within 6 months, try to put a roadmap together to address the problems for your chosen persona. And then add to that roadmap thinking through, like, how am I gonna validate this and measure the impact? Because in the accessibility world, we say nothing about us without us. So how are we gonna validate that this is what we should be fixing? And then drive that roadmap with the collaborators and take the improvements live. With that, thank you again. If you have questions, please find me on LinkedIn. I'm Jennifer-Smith-PCWA. That's puppy, chocolate, Washington, apple, PCWA. Yeah, thank you. And if anybody has questions, I'm happy to take them.
I have a question.
Yes.
Thank you for your presentation, but I had one question. Based on your experience of the personas that you shared up there, which one is top of mind for you as probably the most common, and why do you think that is? You know, again, just,
Yeah.
does that make sense?
It does make sense. I think it depends on what industry you're in as far as what's the most common. But I would say probably the biggest threat is our cautionary tale Dan, because he's aging. He can be in anything and everything. He's really eager, and he's trying to do things on his own. But then when he can't, he just gives up and fails all of the security protocols. So Dan, I think, would be the most common one because his abilities are changing a lot and he's trying not to ask for help. And then when he can't, he's engaging other people that can be bad actors. Mm-hmm. Again, I thank you for your time. I know this isn't a very popular subject. It's not common to hear about it in the cybersecurity world, but I am truly grateful that you spent your valuable time with me today. And hope that if you have anything that comes up later and you want to talk about it, I'm always there and ready to chat. Have a wonderful day. Thank you.